Hello and welcome to Ditching Hourly. I'm Jonathan Stark. Today I am joined by guest Mitch Herrema. Mitch, welcome to the show.
Hey, Jonathan. Thanks for having me.
Can you tell folks a little bit about who you are and what you do before we get started?
So I work at Bulb Digital. We do Office 365 consulting, and we focus on helping people make the most out of their Office 365 subscription and help engage their people and automate business processes. I play a role kind of in operations and new business development, as well as marketing, but traditionally come from a software development background. So I've kind of grown into all of those areas over the years.
A hybrid. Nice.
Right.
Cool. Um, Great. Well, we met at MYOB in Atlanta,
Yep.
and we were talking there about some of the high ticket productized services you guys offer over there. And I dig the positioning, the platform specialization, and so forth. But we wanted to talk about, and maybe we'll get to that. But what can you tell us about your definition of productized services and what you mean by high ticket?
Yeah. So we started off doing hourly billing, and then I discovered your content, and we trekked down the path of ditching hourly, and we started to figure out, hey, it would be really great if we could have an easy way that was easy to understand and start getting involved with organizations, some way that they could see a price, understand a scope and a deliverable, and um, deliver on that thing and consider it something that we actually sell. So instead of starting with almost no, like a rough scope and saying, here's our hourly rate, let's go, it caused us to do a little bit more homework up front. And when we took all the things into account that we normally evaluate when we start working with new clients, the price started to add up more and more. And so we went pretty far down the path of productized services pretty quickly. And we kind of discovered it was maybe a little bit too far. And we've slowly been rolling it back over the years. But
In other words,
um,
putting too much scope into it.
yeah, in trying to cast a like multi-year plan when really they just need a couple months to start, right?
Mm. Yeah, that sounds more like it. In my experience, productized services it's a nice balance of risk and reward if they take, anywhere from 5 to 25 or 30 hours across the course of a couple weeks to maybe 6 or 8 weeks.
Yep.
So you want them to be pretty easy for everybody to get their head around. The scope shouldn't really, I mean, there'll be differences from client to client, of course, but the boundary lines should be really bright. So people are like, oh,
Right.
like what's out of bounds should be super obvious.
Yep.
I'm curious, like, you said years. When did you start? Do you remember when you launched your first productized service?
Oh, probably 2 years ago, probably in 2020, it was kind of a defining moment for us where we started marketing, picking a niche and trying to, we've been trying to go down the fixed price route for more years than that. But
Mm,
really, that was when we finally got everything in order and declared this is a service, a productized service that we provide.
cool. And uh, do you remember back then, scope wise, what it looked like in terms of person hours and uh, like once you sort of got through the initial like trials or whatever your first draft of it, was it big or little back then? Just if you could give people a sense of how much it cost, about how much work went into it, how you felt it went, profitability wise, that kind of thing. What
Yeah,
were your learnings really from that first
sure.
couple of tries?
So we had some that ranged from like 5K, which were really small, really specific positioning. You had to be in the right, uh, the right audience for one of those,
Hmm.
all the way to 100 grand for a large, like we'll say 500 person. These are all made up structures of what large means, but a large organization that needs a multi-year plan, like to improve their employee experience and automate as many business processes as possible. Um, and honestly, we walked back over the years for good reasons because we didn't really sell those,
Hmm.
but we would have anticipated that would take probably hundreds of hours to really be able to make the right recommendations and be informed well enough to um, you know give an educated response there. So
Right.
most of them now have scaled back to somewhere between 5, 10, all the way up to like 45 grand.
Mm-hmm.
And those, um, they're still in a process where some of them are, we've done them once. And so we have a playbook and we can get all the meetings scheduled, all the interviews done, and we have all the slide decks ready, all those things that you normally would um, have to build for the first version of it. And we're starting to feel that with doing it again for the second, third times. And that really helps with the hours spent. So somewhere less than, I don't know, 100 hours, but hopefully somewhere in the 40, 50 range.
Cool. Yeah,
That helps.
that's pretty reasonable. It's still on the large side in my experience, but
Yeah.
as long as you are feeling that uh, the cost cutting, sort of like the leverage that you've created by doing the first one and then being able to repurpose all of the materials to deliver something as good or better even faster, is the
Right.
feeling you should have when you're doing productized services.
Right.
Which and just to like call out the obvious thing, it would make no sense to do that if you were trading time for money. You'd recreate the
Exactly.
slide decks every time and then be charging the client for something that really you could have repurposed if that was part of your business model, if it made sense.
Yeah.
Uh, okay, cool. So those are still kind of on the large side. Like what's a small one look like? I think you said a $5,000 one. What's that sort of look like?
Yeah, well, that one, I don't think that's kind of like my crutch, my like, hey, it's our minimum level of engagement for people, just so we're not dealing with a couple $100 here and there. Our typical one is like 10 grand, which that is largely a handful of interviews, like 4 or 5 hour or so interviews. Plus, we work on our end and basically do quote unquote as much work as necessary to create a 3 month plan. I kind of got the idea from David Baker where he says, I'm going to give you a plan of action. Here's what you should do. And then for 3 months, we're going to be at your call. You can pick up a phone and you can call us or email us questions. And then if you hit, I think we label it 3 significant conversations, then you you've used that support or whatever. And so that is under the assumption that whatever we deliver as a plan, they can do it on their own and they just need us to tap on they need to be able to tap on our shoulder and ask for extra help.
Interesting. So I love that model. First of all, I love the idea of like, here's a detailed roadmap or a plan for you to execute. And we'll be on call for, I love how you said, tap us on the shoulder to ask us a question,
Mm-hmm.
because those pretty much always come up. They're just like, oh, this made sense when we read through it. But now that we're in the thick of things, it's not obvious what this
Right,
means exactly. Could you give us
right.
a, and you said, did you say that that's a hard 3 month? I think you said 3 month.
Yeah, I mean the phrasing is something like 3 months or three significant phone calls, whichever happens first.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Like the 5 year, $50,000 warranty.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. That's interesting that you, do, just not to get into the weeds too much, but who from the client side is allowed to do the tapping? Is it anybody or is it just your main top level project contact?
Yeah, at this point, I it's just the project contact, or maybe they have a small project team. We're not gonna draw too hard of lines around it, but yeah, when they need someone from that team that we've gotten to know through the process needs a hand
Mm-hmm.
with the things that we've laid out for them, they're welcome
Yep.
to ask us.
Cool. And uh, what's the nature of your involvement at that point? Is it truly advisory? Like, there's like a phone call and that's it, or do you like have to log into something or create some kind of deliverable to maybe
Yeah,
communicate? Yeah, how much of a lift is it when? How much of a
it
lift can it
depends.
be? Right.
Yeah, because like in a perfect world, it's something they can just throw over the wall and we'll shoot them back an email, make it quick and easy. But if they need more hands-on, where it's like explaining a concept or we need to do a tiny bit of discovery type thing to help them get unstuck, um, then yeah, it's a phone call. It's digging into those questions, and that's why one of the three significant phone calls is kind of a good uh, fallback on a threshold of what is too much. But
Hmm.
honestly, we would we would hold off from any sort of like logging in to anything, doing any work on our own, and more helping them step through it.
Hmm.
But it kind of depends on the client as to even when this 3 month starts, this three
Yeah.
month phase starts, was whether or not they actually need our help to do that thing or if they can do it on their own. It's not uncommon for us to say, hey, here's all these great things. Here's what ROI you'll see, and you should go do all these things. Good luck. And then say, hold on, wait, can you help us do all those things? Those
Of
sound
course.
great.
Right. Yeah.
So that mechanism is good because it lets them, if they have people to do the work and they just need some steering and some rails put up for them, then it works well for them. If they need something more, then we've already gotten to know them and know how they work a little bit and understand their business and can work better that way.
Hmm. Nice. Yeah, and that is a absolute mirror of most people's experience when I talk to them about people who sell these road mapping or whatever you call it, those upfront strategic
Yep.
or high level design architecture types
We
of
we
things.
we have like three names for three different. It's like a kickstart or a roadmap or a discovery. Like we
Yeah.
use them all.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's reflected in my experience with a lot of people. If listeners wanted to check out, if you search through the past episodes for one with Alex Hillman, he's a soloist and just like closes 100% of the implementation work for every roadmap he does. If he wants the work, he doesn't always
Yeah.
want the work, but it's like a pretty much a no brainer. Like if you do, if dear listener, if you're currently doing project work, doing implementation and execution and that kind of thing, if you've been doing it a while and you're good at it and you are comfortable making these bigger decisions, these higher level decisions up front, maybe you do it every single time you start a new project in the first couple of weeks, but you're billing for it by the hour. If you break that off as a roadmap and sell it as a productized service at a relatively fixed scope at a published price on your website and people buy that, it is like 9 times out of 10, maybe more, the people are going to ask you for a quote for the implementation. And you can say, well, we'd do that. We'd be happy to do that. But this roadmap is totally portable. You could bring it to someone who's a lot more affordable than we are to do the actual implementation. Like our value is really in the upfront stuff. And then, no, no, no. Well, how much would it be? Could you just give us a quote? And they're almost like begging you for a quote. And and you give it to them and you can say, like, I told you it was going to be high. And but they're going to have the trust that they have with you and your understanding of the situation. They're not going to want to redo all that work or some of that work with a new person who they don't trust.
The sunk
So
cost bias is
yeah,
real.
big time. Yeah, it's not just that though. It is that for sure. But there's also the sort of devil, or well, that's not a good way to put it. But you just already know that it's going to be good. You already have these results. You're like, wow, I love the way they work. I get their sense of humor or whatever. Our personalities click. It's going to be worth more money to them to not have to start a search from scratch and take a risk that they get a flake or whatever.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's real value there. It's a I'd pretty much say it's about as proven path as you're going to get in a sort of a sales uh, domain. It's like do a roadmap. They're going to ask you for a quote on the implementation, and you can decide if you want it or not, and warn them that you're going to be the most expensive one.
Right.
And yeah, so the soapbox.
Yeah, it's been a ton of fun. It gets us part of our engagement criteria is like, hey, we need to be able to talk to your leadership, with an asterisk behind it, whatever that means. And that gets us the ear of the people that are making the decision.
Right.
And yeah,
Yeah.
it's like you were saying, it gets them to know us and have some level of trust. And it's kind of a natural progression to move into something after the fact as well.
Mm-hmm. And I do want to address the fact that this isn't really tricky or manipulative sales or high pressure or anything like that because you are delivering value in the roadmap phase.
Right.
So it is portable, right? Like they could take it to someone else, but building up that trust and delivering value I mean, that's how you built the trust is
Right.
like you connect, but you also deliver value. And they're like, wow, this is great. We want more from this partner. So it's just a natural human progression. It's like dating before getting married, really. So it's like
Mhm.
let's test drive the relationship with with an engagement that's very low risk for both of us. It's a fixed price for them, so they don't have to worry about their bank account leaking money, for, potentially
Right.
forever, and you don't have to worry about the risk of a unruly project that kind of goes sideways because there's so many unknown unknowns. So it's really good for both parties. It's low risk, and I just wanted to like call out the fact that it's effective, but it's not bad for the client. It's not like some kind of like a high pressure sales thing that you're tricking them or sucking them into it. It's like
Right.
good for everybody.
Right. Yeah, it's a lot of just like uh, on pulling back the wool from their eyes to what a future could be, and them being like, "Oh yeah, okay, I get it. Let's keep that train moving." And it's
Mm-hmm.
not, yeah, there's no agenda outside of like, "Hey, we just want to bring expose opportunity to you," and hopefully everyone gets on board.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, my when I was doing client work, my main goal, like I would go so far as to say my work product was customer satisfaction.
Mhm.
It wasn't code or features or some design. It was like 100% customer satisfaction every time I could do it. That's what I wanted. That was the reason that I stopped doing hourly in the first place because I could find no way to satisfy the customer reliably with a clock ticking. So yeah, um,
Yeah, how do you measure that?
which satisfaction?
Well, yeah,
Glowing testimonials. You will know me by the trail of smiling clients.
yeah, okay. Because that's one thing.
It's totally subjective.
Okay, because that's one thing in our process of we're essentially selling confidence in a plan
Mm-hmm.
with these roadmap projects, and
Yeah, you're
so
predicting the future.
yeah, we're trying to still nail down our best way to measure that impact, right? And so right now it's like a survey at the beginning and a survey at the end, so that you can see how the numbers change or whatever, so, something
Mm-hmm.
like that. It's still kind of a penciled in solution, but um, it's fun to think along those lines as opposed to focusing on some like tactile deliverable, and it's more on like how do you feel off
Mm-hmm.
of how we interacted.
Right. It's like, oh, we you asked us to install a pool in your backyard, and there it is. We installed the pool. See you later. Bye.
Right.
That's not. But it's like, how are they going to use the pool? Is it like for their, a gathering place for three generations every summer for a month? Like, what's
Mhm.
that worth? That's worth a different thing than like an above ground pool in a rental unit. It's just totally different. So what I do is I have a list of 6 questions that I use after a project that encourages the client. The client will say something flattering, and I'll say, "Oh, that's super nice to hear. Hey, would it be okay? I'm updating my website. Would it be okay if I sent over a couple of questions that you could answer about the project?" They always say yes, and they don't get to it right away, but they always say yes. And I send the
Mhm.
questions over, and the questions are specifically designed to produce numbers in the answers. So there's room for them to give qualitative feedback, but also the way the questions are phrased, it encourages them to also give numbers, either absolute or relative. Like, oh, before Jonathan, we were at 50%, and now we're at 95%. That kind of thing. And if you know you're going to send those questions at the end, it causes you to ask specific questions at the beginning,
Sure.
knowing that that's what you're shooting for. So you're going to want to know, like, ideally, what number are you trying to move? And maybe you, Mitch, or you, the dear listener, you can't move the number they want to move, but they believe that you can contribute to it with some leading indicator, and you want to find out what that is.
Yeah. That's a fun one. It I imagine it could be as black and white in my world, but it doesn't always feel that black and white. Just because it depends on how a client is coming to us. If it's, hey, my Office 365 subscription includes these things and I don't know how to use them, I want to know how to use them. Like there's usually some business driver there. It depends on who you're talking to, if it's the IT guy or the human resources talent experience person. But yeah, sometimes it can feel a little bit just like, okay, let's validate what you think you need to do is what you actually need to do. And that's part of the outcome is confidence in that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, first of all, you're right. It is always squishy and subjective. It's never black and white in the objective sense, but it's pretty black and white in the subjective sense. So
Mhm.
if you talk to the real economic buyer up front, if you can do that, and they say, "Oh, we want to, we have this software. We know we're not using it to the full extent," then you just have the why conversation, and which takes practice. It's an art, but you have the why conversation, and you're like, well, who cares? Like, you're probably not using 100% of any of your software. Like, what's the problem you're trying to like?
Right.
You're coming to me with a solution? You've self-diagnosed the solution, so like, why that? And from the top dog, you find out what they're really trying to do. Maybe it's increase productivity or decrease blah, blah. They don't want to hire more people. They want to increase productivity of existing or whatever it is. And you're like, okay, in this particular client engagement, this is the needle I need to move. It might not be the same needle in every engagement, even though you're doing the exact same stuff. The needle you're trying to move can the thing that you do, the activities you undertake can move lots of different needles. It's a question of like, why does this person care? And then you're like, well, do I have the confidence that I can do what this person ultimately wants? So yeah, so it's in the one sense, it's totally not black and white, but objectively, but it is subjectively. If you can get good at that why conversation, you'll find out what they're trying to change. What is that thing that they're trying to change? And then if you think you can do it, then you go do it.
Yeah.
And at the end, when you ask for the testimonial, that's the thing they're going to talk about.
Yeah. Um, Related thing, I don't want to distract too much from the testimonial, but a recent learning in selling this productized service structure, we actually engaged with in conversation with I'll call him a non-decision maker. He kind
Okay.
of self-assessed and chose one of our services, presented it to his leadership, wanted us to be involved in a conversation with his leadership, and we started off that conversation with the premise of this is really what they need, and we just need to like answer any clarifying questions, and it's all kind of all there. But turns out, nope, he picked the wrong thing. It was focused on the wrong part of their business, and so our whole like conversation got derailed by that concept of this is
Mm-hmm.
not going to do what we need to do in
Right.
the short term. And it was obvious. I wasn't going to like tell them they're wrong or anything. Like they had a different pain point than what this spoke to. And so it
Mm.
caught me totally off guard, and it almost like deflated the whole conversation. And
Mm.
it was challenging.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the challenges of productized services.
Well, one thing I'll point out is that especially for your higher price things, um, if the influencer, if the person who's out there looking for stuff, looking for solutions, isn't the economic buyer, like they're two different people, then yeah, you can get into this situation when the I don't know, the employee or the underling, the gatekeeper, whatever you want to call them,
Yep.
when they bring it to the leadership. I mean, yours are sort of more expensive than others. Technically, I wouldn't get on a phone call to sell a productized service. It kind of defeats the point.
Yeah. We had this
But
conversation too.
yeah, we probably did, right? So
Yeah.
it kind of defeats the point. So it's kind of like, well, if the page doesn't sell itself, I need to work on the page,
Right.
not jump on a phone call. And maybe I would jump on the phone call to kind of like figure out what I'm doing wrong on the page, just as a research thing once or twice. But if the page doesn't, if the admin or whatever is like, oh, this is what we need, and it's like, okay, send it, buy it, go ahead, get approval, like you do it.
Right. Right.
And then you, Mitch, you don't look like you're wasting the CEO's time or whatever. However, that like, you don't look like you're pitching. You don't look like you're trying to make something happen. And you're not, because the flip side is you could kind of throw the underling under the bus. You have no choice but to throw the underling under the bus and say like start off the meeting by saying like, hey, Bob said that you guys really need this thing.
Yep.
I don't know if that's true. I don't know enough to know if that's accurate or not accurate. So let's essentially have a sales conversation
Yep.
right now,
Uh,
and then I can tell you if it's a good fit, and if not, what might be. So,
Yeah.
so now you're doing sales, which is the point of the productized service, is not have to do that.
Yep. I fell into the trap, Jonathan. He brought me into that meeting and said, "Hey, here's our CEO. want to tell them a little bit about what you do. And the win without pitching folks would be so upset with me. I
Yeah.
fell for it. I went for it, and it totally it made us be a vendor in the process and shot down.
And you could totally feel it, right?
Yeah,
Like all of a sudden you're like,
I'm doing way too much talking here.
right, right. I should be taking notes, not talking.
Right.
Yeah, you can
Yep.
feel it's the worst feeling.
Yep.
I had one person jump on one time. It's like, I have this application process for a high ticket thing, and said, okay, it's like the application looked good. I jumped on the phone call, and he started off by saying something to the effect of like, okay, sell me on this, and I was like, no,
Uh-huh.
if you're not sold, this isn't gonna work,
Yep.
and you just gotta like, boom, and if when you do stuff like that, you could possibly. For future reference, if someone listening finds themselves in a situation like this, because it's not that uncommon, then you just never want to pitch. It's like it's the worst thing to do. It's like the least effective thing to do. You want to flip it around and be like, I don't want to take your money if isn't an obvious good fit. I'm not interested in your money. I want to deliver customer satisfaction, not like cash checks.
Right.
So if you derail the whole thing, but in your situation, really hard to do without throwing that person who brought you in, who's trying to do you a favor in their mind, really hard
Right.
to do it without throwing them under the bus and being like, Bob, you really shouldn't have scheduled this meeting and wasted everybody's time.
Right. Yep.
So yeah,
Yeah.
that's uncomfortable.
Yeah. I mean, it was a great learning experience. There's no better way to learn, maybe outside of a role play exercise, but no, it's been a fun road. I'll say one of the other challenges, like you talked about, not having a call before selling it. Like it in this case, I think it was 25 grand on the
Hmm.
bottom line, and it's like that's a lot to say. Like here, click this, put in your card info, and go. And so I think we're trying to balance that productized nature of it, that it's supposed to be just choose off the shelf and buy for yourself,
Hmm.
with hey, we're open to having a conversation to like make sure it's the right fit for you.
Hmm. So imagine if that's totally true. Imagine if Bill Gates had a service like this for email three, like for whatever it's called. What's it called? Office
Office,
365.
yeah.
And it was 25,000. It could be sell out every day. Like it'd be sold out every day.
Right.
So the problem, not I'm not saying there's a problem, but the phone call thing isn't about the amount of money. It's about how much they trust you before they buy.
Right. Right.
So the approach, if that's the kind of thing you want to do, dear listener, if you want to have like a, push the envelope of how much you can ask someone to swipe their credit card for or ACH a payment to you, is all about building your reputation. 100%.
Yep.
That's all it is. Because you even said earlier, it's like you feel like you're selling confidence. It's true.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been that like I said, 2 years ago was kind of the kickoff of us productizing, doing some marketing, and that was the other side of the coin, which was let's get out there, start a YouTube channel, write blogs, all those kinds of things, so
Mm-hmm.
that people get to know us and trust us, and we get to help a lot of people along the way. And so it's
Mm-hmm.
been super rewarding and tons of fun, but not quite swipe a $25,000 expense level yet.
Right. Yeah, normally the people I talk to normally, the productized services will start anywhere from like 500 to 1,000 for a one-off ad hoc phone call, like one-on-one phone call, just like, clients like, I don't even know what I want, but I sense that you have what I want.
Yep, we do
And
that too.
yeah, so that's the no-brainer. Like anybody
Right.
that's good at anything that they do and sell services should put that on their website right now. It takes about 30 minutes tops. Create a Calendly account, hook it up to your Stripe account, boom, done. Then there's usually it's pretty common to have something that's 500 to 1,000, then something from the 1,000 to 5,000 or 2,500 to 5,000 to 7,500 is around $5,000 range. That is a little bit more roadmappy, where there's a meeting, maybe a couple of meetings, there's some research, there's some discovery, and then there's a report of some kind of recommendations at the end. And those sell in all across all kinds of industries for approximately 5 grand all the time. And we're talking about small to medium businesses where you're probably dealing directly with the owner or someone way up in leadership. Uh, when you start getting into enterprise, if people listening are doing enterprise sales, it's a different ball game. You could probably add a zero to both the dollar amounts and the length of the sales cycle. You could maybe 10x the sales cycle, 10x the price. Um, but it sort of depends. But if you're selling to small to medium businesses, you can work directly with the owner. $5,000 is like a no-brainer price in lots of spaces if you've got the street cred, like you're the go-to person for the thing. And they're like, we're not even looking at anyone else. We've just been saving up the 5 grand. Here you go.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just, when you're talking about those price points, I was like evaluating, could we hit those? And I realized part of what is going on right now is because we're new to these things and still building some of the systems, we have maybe more people involved than should be because we're trying
Mm.
to reach consensus or train multiple people up on it, which inherently leads to higher cost. That's not to say I don't think the service is worth it at all, but maybe our math to determine the bottom price
Yeah,
uh,
the walkaway price.
is a factor based on how we're going about building this thing.
It could be. So a lot of times when I work with someone to create a productized service, the plan is like, okay, let's brainstorm what's some stuff you've done a bunch of times in the past. And then, okay, great. How does that usually go? Give me a timeline of the shared accountabilities for the thing from the moment that the client pays to the moment that you are done, that you deliver the whatever it is. And then we look at the activities involved and that from which we derive a cost. Like what's the walkaway price for the person I'm working with? Like what's the least amount of money you'd accept for this? $1,000. Okay, so let's maybe run a beta with 3 pilot people. You get 3 beta customers, or run a pilot program with 3 people, and it tells you a bunch of things. First of all, if they can't get 3 people, they're in trouble. For a free version of this, a pro bono version of this service, they're in
Right.
trouble because it tells me they don't have access to the audience they're trying to sell to. But if they're like, okay, that's not a problem, I got 3, no problem. You say, okay, the deal is in exchange. It's we know money will change hands, but it is not free. It's in exchange for feedback on the marketing, sales, and delivery of the product, of the productized service, and pricing guidance. We'll have a pricing conversation after the fact, and then if you're happy with the outcome, I would love a testimonial. So you're getting all of that stuff in exchange for the doing the work pro bono.
Mhm.
And the thing that you're looking, one of the things you're looking for is in that delivery piece. So with their beta customers or beta clients, you'd look and say, all right, what are the things that you felt really added value, and what things did we do that you didn't really care about? And you can just cut the ones they didn't care about straight out
Yeah.
and decrease your costs. And then, so there could be things that you originally imagined were going to feel high value, and you're doing them, but you don't actually know if they're perceived as high value. And it's extremely common for people when they're looking at this price they want to charge. It's like, I want to have a productized service that costs $10,000. And to themselves, they will often justify what they perceive to themselves as a high price by doing more work, regardless of whether or not that's providing any additional value to the client. So they
Right.
just add busy work in to justify the price.
Right.
It's very, very common. And so I'll look at this timeline of the shared accountabilities and be like, well, why are you going to do that? And they're like,
Right.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know.
Seems like the thing to do, I
Seems like
guess.
the thing to do. It's like they don't even realize why they're doing it. They're doing it. They're padding their hours basically.
Right.
They're saying like, look, I'm doing all this hard. I'm working hard to justify this number. It's like, no,
Yep.
take all the hard work out. The more hard work you can take out without decreasing the value commensurate amount. Like if you can decrease your work by a factor of 10, but only decrease the value by a factor of 2, then you've created a much more profitable scenario for yourself.
Yeah. I think we've been on a natural progression towards that because, like I said, we started off where the highest one was like 100 grand, and that's crazy. But we're now selling the same, I'll call it feeling, for 10 grand.
Mm-hmm.
They don't really care about how far into the future we're planning or how deep we necessarily go. If we go deep enough to make them feel good in the short term and confident,
Mm-hmm.
then we're doing our job.
Yeah, I love that language choice. So like that you're selling a feeling, and people, especially engineering types. And I've got an engineering background, well, software if you want to call that engineering, and but very logical, very like it works or it doesn't work, and like the idea of selling a feeling is like sell the sizzle, not the steak, and like just gets people's eyes rolling.
Uh-huh.
But if you step back and think, well, how do you think it would affect your business if you were delivering 100% customer satisfaction every time and your clients were all raving about how expensive you were, but how worth it it was? Every penny was worth it. It's like customer satisfaction. That would be great for your business, like no doubt. You'd have word of mouth, you'd have powerful marketing, you'd have great testimonials, have a packed pipeline. Well, guess what? Customer satisfaction is nothing but a feeling. It is a lack, or the sort of other end of the spectrum of buyer's remorse. So if you deliver buyer's remorse to all of your clients, that is also a feeling. You could deliver all the code and features and PDFs and calendars and all the things that you said you were going to do, but if they regret the money they invested in you, even if they believe it's their fault, if they regret the purchase, they're not going to rave about you to their friends, even though it's not your fault,
Right.
and especially if it is your fault. so that's all we're doing. I sometimes resist boiling it down to this, but that is what it boils down to. They
Right.
are either happy or sad that they gave you this pile of money. And if they're happy, you will do great. If you can
Right.
continue to make people happy that they gave you their money, people will continue to give you their money. And that is nothing but a feeling, totally subjective, qualitative. And you can
Right.
support it with numbers and those sorts of things to sort of justify to the rational mind. But ultimately, everybody who sells something is selling a feeling. Anyway.
Yeah. I feel like we're on a constant path of, like, if you're used to working with people who, once you get in the door and you work with them and for a while and help them out, and you're used to hearing, oh my gosh, I love these guys. These guys are great.
Hmm.
All we're trying to do is like figure out how to get there the fastest and the easiest to understand way.
Yeah. Fastest path to value.
Yeah.
Fastest path to love.
Yeah,
Fastest path to
exactly.
positive feelings. Right.
Exactly.
It's like my last and forever. I think only boss. I've had a couple of bosses. No, so my last boss years ago used to have this line. It was like, we need to get points on the board. He would be like, get points on the board. So we'd have a new project would come in, and he'd be like, get points on the board, like early and often. It's like if you have like, say, like in a basketball game, let's say, 100 points are going to be scored throughout the course of the game. It's like score 90 of them in the first period,
Uh-huh.
and then you'll have so much trust built up the rest of the time that you don't need to score as many points later. It's super important to score points early on, and then guess what? You could just stop the game in the second period. I'm stretching the sports metaphor a little bit, but
Yeah.
I just love
There's
your.
mercy rules sometimes, right?
Is that true? That can't be well, it wouldn't happen in professional, I suppose. But I just love your framing of it, where you're like, we're delivering the same feeling for a lot lower price. It's like, right, if you focus on delivering the feeling, you can probably find ways to decrease your costs in delivering that feeling. So decrease your costs to as close to zero as possible, and
Right.
sell single phone calls. If you have enough of a pipeline, you could, phone calls are incredibly profitable, and
Yeah.
you can deliver a massive amount of value to the right person, and they'll pay $1,000 for a 15-minute phone call, or $10,000 for an hour-long phone call. It doesn't matter how long it is. It really just matters like how stuck they are, how expensive the problem is, and whether or not you can get them closer to what they want, if in a not in a way, but like for an amount that they're happy to have paid.
Right. Yeah. One of the biggest challenges of that is, like, I have a guy who knocks it out of the park every time. He's one of the smartest people I know. I could throw him at any problem and he could make someone happy. But I can't put him on this cheap hamster wheel of turning these things out one after the other. And so it's an extra like challenge element, saying we want a team to do this. We want to bring up more people into this process. So it's not just this guy, like,
So this is an employee.
yeah, he's one of the founders.
Okay, and he's a commando basically.
Yes.
He's not a security guard.
Right.
Right. So he's your innovation guy. So you send him out into the field to come up with new products and services. So he's the type of person that can figure stuff out, land behind enemy lines, and like accomplish the mission and get out alive. So that's where the innovation will come from. So if you throw all these new problems, if you find increasingly expensive problems to throw at your commando, you can then say, "Oh wow, this is repeatable." Like this, but he's not the person to repeat it.
Right.
The commandos are not good at that. They get super bored. They want bigger challenges. They don't have
Yep.
a. No, they're more like a Broadway performer. They can crush it in the moment, but they just like don't ask me to like do something every day, the same thing every day, like
Yep.
a cube drone.
Repeat, repeat, repeat.
Right. So you get operations people to do that. You get, other people for whom that is fun. Like there
Right.
are people that cannot stand that level of off book improvisation and would just love to be in a cover band. Like they don't want to be John Coltrane. They want to be, playing at Frozen Fire at people's weddings. And yeah, so you just have to staff that differently if you were going to use staff at all.
Right. Yeah. I think it's just an extra element of difficulty trying to figure out balancing it costing enough where you can train a team in the process, still delivering great value, but over time figuring out how to reduce those costs and trade it for something that's repeatable. It's just a, a learning process that takes time and multiple, iterations.
Yes, I applaud your patience. I don't have the patience to have employees, but it is a good way to create leverage, especially if you're using fixed prices. I kind of, as you were saying that, I was kind of picturing a snake where your commando guy is like the head of the snake and it's like hunting around for things. And the brain part is kind of like doing the kind of job that it's optimized for. And then you kind of have to digest the stuff that it catches and be like,
Right.
all right, what do we do with this? Is this, can we turn this into something and operationalize it and make it repeatable and start with, maybe SOPs is like a great first start. It's easy. It's easy. It's sort of for a soloist like me, I wear all those hats so I can feel when it's happening. Like I can feel the difference. Where
Mhm.
like some days I am just like banging my head against a text document trying to design a new workshop, and I'm like totally in creative mode,
Yep.
totally in problem solving mode. How am I going to do this? How am I going to do this? I'm not good enough. I don't know. I want to do anything else. I want to check social media. I don't, that's the mode when you're in innovation mode. And then it's funny because I'll like have a late, I'll be up all night doing like, I'm definitely a night owl when it comes to creative stuff. And then when I look back at it like the next day, I'm like, wow, I almost don't remember doing that. Like that's
Uh-huh.
really good,
Uh-huh.
or this piece stinks, but these other three things are good. And so I kind of fix it up and then I test it and then I feel myself move into the mode of COO. So the first thing's kind of like CEO, visionary, blah blah blah,
Mhm.
and then COO, and I'm like, okay, now I'm like writing down the steps. If I was going to hand this off to someone, these are the steps they would take so that I can easily downshift into drone mode when I need to execute. And I don't want to use any creative energy because I want to save that for those late night sessions where I'm like, you know, in existential crisis.
Right.
I don't want an existential crisis about like how to go live with a webinar. It's like it's so stupid,
Right.
that's just dumb. Wrote, follow the checklist and do the things. So now it's funny to imagine spreading that out, like trying to hire for each of those different roles and like spreading those
Oh yeah.
responsibilities. It's like whose superpower is attention to detail and
Yep.
whose superpower is improvisation, problem solving. Like you
Yep.
don't want your problem solvers focused on, detail oriented tasks.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. I'll say that's one of the biggest things that I've had to like almost reverse engineer with a lot of people that advise on this level or create content about this stuff are
Hmm.
solopreneurs. And so I'm constantly trying to figure out, okay, I get that. I could do that if I was on my own. How do I spin that in a way that works for a lot of people
Right.
and bringing a team around it? And yeah, that whole process of taking the commando, someone who's been working hourly for 20 plus years, and
Mhm.
say, okay, now you need to figure out how to encapsulate that into a thing that is repeatable so that I can have someone else do it. It's such a mind shift and a labor of love. I'll call it that.
Yeah. You almost need like a documentarian. Is that how you say it? Documentarian to kind of, or like someone keeping minutes of
Yeah,
just observing, like an embedded journalist in the front lines,
right,
like just capturing what the person did.
right,
It's like a fly on the wall, just like recording everything. And because the commando is going to want to move on to the next thing, they're not going to document anything.
right.
It's like,
Yep.
I did the hard part. You figured that out.
Yep. But then figuring out, okay, you asked this question. That doesn't mean we have to ask the same exact question the next time. It means we have to understand why they asked that
Yeah.
question,
Yeah.
right?
Right. So you could, I mean, not to get overly tactical here, but it does feel like you would want to take a journalist type of person or a technical writer or someone like that who's really a real good communicator and real good at documentation and almost interview the person or go through their email or their notes, like all the communications for the project from the very first, hey, we think we want to hire you, all the way to the successful delivery.
Yep.
Capture all that information, take a bunch of notes, almost like they're writing a book on it, and then interview the commando at, why did you decide this? What was going through your mind? Like the stuff that's the behind the scenes stuff that's not on the page.
Yep.
I would think that would be, um, I could imagine being in that mode, commando mode, and being able to do that. Like
Yeah.
that being like, because it puts you on a pedestal a little bit. If it doesn't really require you to be creative, you're just responding to questions, but it would take a
Right.
good interview or yeah, like almost like a journalist type, like a business. It needs to be like a someone who knows. Yeah, that's actually an interesting role to hire for,
Very much.
right?
Yeah.
It's like how do you know how to?
What's that job description?
Yeah, I can't. It's a cross between a journalist and a technical writer, and like almost like an operations person.
Mhm.
Huh, that's
Yeah,
weird.
I think that's part. Been playing part of that role over the years, and yeah, we have a delivery lead where their job is um, a lot of what you're talking about, like controlling the process from start to finish. But and then when we're done with it, retro with the team. What did we like? What didn't we like? What do we want to do
Mm-hmm.
different? And then documenting that for the next time.
Mm,
Um, we're starting to feel those benefits,
mm.
but it's been a long time coming.
Again, I applaud your patience. It's like it's a good way to create leverage. If you can create those systems and deploy them across a bunch of different people who are oriented to the task at hand
Mhm.
and really thrive doing whichever kind of work, whether it's more creative or more rote.
I think I see the future in that, so that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, and it's been a ton of fun. But yeah, I appreciate, like, I think I told you when we met, I totally stumbled across your concept of ditching hourly, and it has snowballed into much of this.
Oh,
So it's
sorry
been
about
fun.
that. Cool. I mean, so just curious, how many employees do you have?
Uh, we're like 10 plus a handful of contractors that we have do
Mm-hmm.
couple odds and ends things.
Well, and people are the 10 are like full time FTEs, right?
Yeah.
Like W
Yep.
2s.
Yep.
And so you got non trivial payroll. Like, I'm just curious, like, where do your leads come from? How do you get enough business to keep the lights on and not be like panicking at the end of every month or the middle of every
Yeah.
month?
Yeah. Well, we have the blessing and a curse of a large government contract
Mm-hmm.
is one of the things,
Yeah.
which is super stable. It's super reliable, just not the best arrangement.
Right.
And then we've started to see the fruits of all the marketing and getting leads in every now and then who have either found our content from a tactical perspective, someone who needed to do something and realized they needed the extra help, and so they kind of march the need to whoever needs
Yeah.
to be involved, and yeah, just fill out a form on our website. And so those have been started to be more regular. And so that's, like I said, the fruits of all the efforts kind of put together in one. So it's been
Cool.
fun.
We probably talked about this in Atlanta, but have you thought about? I have a vague memory we did talk about this, but like, what about a training, like a
Yeah.
self-paced video training as lead magnet, but it is paid?
Yeah. So we did one course specific to one of the Microsoft tools. Um it was kind of a test, very much let's see how it goes.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't do awesome,
Mm-hmm.
frankly, and so we're a little bit hesitant about dipping too far into that.
Yeah, they do
There's
cost some time and money to create.
Yeah, honestly, there's a ton of people in our space that do a lot of how-to content.
Mm-hmm.
We typically lean towards why-to content,
Mm-hmm.
which doesn't necessarily speak to the person that just wants to accomplish something. So
Mm-hmm.
we're trying to find our way in that arena. But yeah, honestly, we have something coming up that we are going to try to take one of the concepts that we've been teaching about, like on our YouTube channel, and go a little bit deeper in a webinar, like a paid webinar, something that's like, I don't know, $40 or something
Mm-hmm.
for a couple hours to dig in, um, just as a way to validate both interest in that topic as well as would it make sense to build a course off of this? If we can get 10 people to pay $40 out of our audience, is that some kind of indicator that other people will pay more for it as a
Mm-hmm.
not scheduled, something they can keep forever, quote
Right.
unquote?
Right. Yeah, I'm a big fan of that idea. I think that's cool.
I think the thing that we talked about in Atlanta was trying to outsource the hands work. If a organization is trying to outsource their hands work, and us giving a subscription to do that, in the same vein as like Design Joy, if you've
Yeah.
followed along with them,
Yeah.
right? I don't know if that's the way to go, and I think you were suggesting to do some sort of alternative boot camp kind of thing as opposed to selling the hands work. So
Uh, I I am generally against hands work. I'm always against hands work if it's a soloist. Always, 100% of the time. Don't you'll never get anywhere.
yeah.
If you have hands though, if you have like a high inventory of hands,
Yep.
then then it's an approach. I mean, it doesn't not work. It's just like, is that where you want to go? Right.
Right.
So like when you've got options and you could do different things, it's like, where do you want to create the leverage? If you're,
Right.
good, you enjoy, like literally enjoy leading a team and want to get better at it, and you read books about it on the weekend, and like you're that kind of person, then yeah, that's like, to me, that's a green flag. Like, have employees, do it if that's the way you want to go, if you like enjoy that sort of thing. The the thing with hands work is, if that's the thing that you're selling, if that's the thing that they think they want, and you're like, oh, there's demand for hands to do this, it's almost never high profit, if
Yeah.
because they're just thinking about it in a particular way that's low profit. It's like driving to the Home Depot and getting a bunch of guys to jump in the back of your pickup to go do lawns. You don't care who the guys are. You just don't care. You just want the leaves. Like, you just have these
Right.
commitments that you need to to keep in order to run everybody's credit cards at the end of the month. So
Yep.
it's almost a business model decision, even though it's not technically a business. I don't think it's technically a business model decision, but it almost becomes that, because you're deciding to be low profit. So it becomes a volume play.
Yep. And then what protections can you put in place to try to preserve profit? It's a totally like backwards.
It's a low margin game.
Yeah.
So which is predictable. So the nice thing about low margin games is they're pretty predictable.
Mhm.
But the thing is, like, it was a creative conference. You're in a creative space. You're like an expert at a particular thing. So commoditizing it is almost like throwing away your lead. It's like tying a hand behind your back,
Yeah.
so to speak. It's like,
Yeah.
wait, we actually know what we're doing. So we could meet with the partner with the client upstream when they're deciding what to do in the first place, whether or not they should even pick this platform,
Mhm.
whether or not they should hire internally or outsource it. Like, these decisions that the CEO or the CIO might make, Like if you're capable of playing at that altitude, it's way more profitable. It's like,
Right.
and when
Totally.
I say more profitable, I mean percentage wise, like work to value, like cost to value, it's more profitable. Revenue wise, might not be, but you could be making $1 million a year or $10 million a year and losing 11.
Right.
It's not about revenue is a vanity metric.
Right.
So it's like what's the game plan here? Is the game plan to get a bunch of commodity labor and sell the inventory of hands that we have or the inventory of hours that we have and just keep increasing the inventory because until it meets the demand, and we'll probably never meet the demand. That's a move. It's definitely a
Yeah.
move. It becomes like, well, what kind of company do I want to have?
Yeah.
Is it
I'll,
expertise based consultative thing? And
I'll say it's at odds. I'm fully aware it's at odds with our advisory type services. And so one thing I've made very intentional is I have framed it as a different brand, basically.
mhm,
It's like a product of Bulb Digital.
right.
It's not one of the services on our page. So
Yeah.
it's I'm trying to separate myself from it a little bit. I'll say that the one time that it made sense to us was we had a client where we advised with them on the strategic level, helped them with a little bit of hand stuff, and then we had trained up one of their resources, and then that resource went and got a different job. And so this client's like, oh my gosh, can you help us? And so that's why we started to say, we really want to help. What's the best way to do it without selling our time? So,
Yeah, I mean, there's demand for foot rubs too, but it doesn't mean you're going to start selling them, right? So,
right.
so yeah, it's
It's
my
hard to say no to work. Like it reminds me of the classic, I don't know who said this, but there's a lot of ways to make money. Some are more right than others, right?
that's a good. I've never heard that
So
one.
it's just, you gotta be willing to do it, but it's not for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, I think I see it. Right or wrong doesn't have anything to do with what I'm about to say, but what I see is as a soloist, there's like, broadly speaking, I think there are three altitudes of involvement with a client. At the
Mhm.
top, it's strategy. In the middle, it's implementation. And at the bottom, it's maintenance.
Mhm.
And a soloist might have a foot in two adjacent ones at the same time, but definitely not three.
Yeah.
Maybe two, but preferably one, and only two while they're transitioning to the higher one. So either pick one and do it, or be in one and be transitioning to the next one. And you've kind of got like some old clients on the old one, and you've got new clients on the new one. So, someone who's like a maintenance person could move their way up into implementation, and then someone from
Mhm.
implementation could move up into strategy. And they're going to have a foot in both worlds probably for some period of time, 6 months, 18 months, whatever. um, a, a business with like your size, maybe 10 employees, can probably operate indefinitely in two adjacent altitudes, but
Mhm.
not three.
Mhm.
Like it doesn't make sense because being in the business of maintenance, mopping up puke in the hallway, looks bad if you're also trying to sell architecture services.
Right.
Like you could, like
Yep.
the people, but it's like the brain surgeon piercing ears at the pagoda in the mall. It doesn't. It's like they could spend their weekends doing that. They're qualified to do it. There's demand for it, but it calls their surgery into question. It's like if you were good at brain surgery, why are you piercing ears on the weekend? It's the same with like if you were so good at strategic planning for Office 365 implementations, why are you like creating and deleting email accounts for us
Yep.
on a monthly basis? It doesn't make sense. It's like that should be a waste of your time. So if you're doing all three at your size, if you're doing all three, it's a bad look for your high ticket stuff. I think it's a negative. I think it's a negative.
Yeah.
So smart to keep it separate.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, it is a challenge for sure. And I appreciate the advisement. It's we come from a world where it's like, hey, we're gonna build you this thing. Here's our hourly rate. And then here it is, it's built. And they say, okay, well, what do I do if it breaks? And so it's like, oh, well, let's do a monthly support thing. And then that creates the relationship where it's like, oh, hey, remember when we did that thing a year ago? We want to add on to that. And then it like rinse and repeat. It's a little bit of a monster that you create for yourself, which you you can make money off of, but it is, you're right, at odds with, hey, we're going to come in and be strategic and set you on the right path and push you out of the nest.
Yeah, I mean, what you, yeah, exactly, right. That's a good way to put it. But what you just described for a company of your size is really only two altitudes:
Right.
build and maintain.
Right. Yep.
If you want to go up to, the profitability, if you eventually, if the plan, it might not be the plan. If the plan is eventually to make the bulk of your revenue from a strategic level engagement, like Bill Gates is like Bill Gates might do, or,
Right.
whoever, Sanjay or whatever, Satya, it's just strategic decision. It's like, okay, what's our objective? What kind of business do we want to have? Do I want to be the kind of person that creates jobs for 50 people and gives them some place to thrive? That's
Right.
perfect. I mean, it's not my path, but that's totally valid.
Hmm.
And if that's what you want, then that probably almost definitely looks like a bunch of people operating in the build altitude,
Yep.
almost for sure. Because you
Yeah.
don't need lots of people. You don't need 50 people unless you're McKinsey. You don't need 50 people operating at the strategic level. You need one or two tops.
Right.
So so yeah, if you want to help people get a leg up in the world and give them opportunities and a safe, reliable job, you're probably going to be doing some build. And if you want to get to like 100 employees, then you're probably going to be doing support and probably not going to be well known for strategy work.
Hmm. Yep. They are at odds for sure.
Mm. Yeah, there's a whiff. There's something going on there. There's a whiff of desperation if you're taking all comers.
Right. Yep. It's
Well, you've
been
got me
no.
talking. We could go all day for sure.
Oh,
Is there anything you were hoping to ask or get to, as we're sort of wrapping up here?
no, I think we've been talking about it is just how to take someone with your positioning who is advising typically small or solopreneurs, and how do you, are there any secrets to abstracting that into a larger company? And I think we've been digging into that a bit. And there's I don't think there's a clear answer. I think it's, you just take the good out of the principles of what you stand for and try to apply it at a larger size.
Yeah, it's true. I think the high level, certainly the theory of cost price value applies to every business.
Mhm.
That's super important. And deciding the idea of deciding what kind of business you want to create applies to everybody. I mean, it's easy to create the business that responds to the demand that you're exposed to, but is that the business you want to create? Like that's a
Right.
really important thing that applies to everybody that's running their own business. And then maybe the altitude thing I think is pretty universal as well, where it's really hard to operate at three altitudes unless you have like 100 people at least.
Right. Oh, that just reminded me. What I was going to say is we were giving away the strategy first, right? Like we
Yeah, that's
were
pretty common.
in the sales process, just giving it all away so that we could get the implementation work.
Right.
And
Right.
now we're putting up a little bit of a wall in that process and saying, "Hey, you gotta get in bed with us a little bit
Yeah,
in order
put a ring
to
on it.
get our hands." Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very David C. Baker thing. It's like come in through the strategy door.
right.
Totally agree with that. But that does for a 10-person shop, that does kind of indicate that you're going to want to minimize or at least hide the maintenance stuff, the support stuff.
Yep. Yeah, we've actually even considered, like, do we only offer that to existing clients that we particularly like
Oh yeah.
versus,
Oh, without a doubt, I would say yes
yeah,
to that. Without a doubt.
yeah,
Yeah. You only want to be supporting your own code, and you only want to be working with clients who aren't onerous.
yep, yep. That's that goes to say, like, I think what you're touching on here is uh this can all be whatever we want it to be, right?
Yeah.
It's all made up in a sense, and it's really fun to kind of piece it all together and create something from nothing essentially.
Yeah, it's the best. Value creation,
Yep,
creativity. That's how
yep,
wealth is created. That's how it's how humanity, whatever you want to call it. It's like why we're not sitting in caves trying to like make sparks with rocks.
right,
It's the
right,
best.
yep.
It's the most fun game ever.
Yeah, it's turned into a hobby of mine that I did not anticipate when I took a job to be a software developer here. You know,
Yeah,
it's evolved for sure. It's been a ton of fun.
cool. Well, great. Where can people go to find out more about what you guys are doing?
Yeah, head to www.bulb.digital. We have one of the fancy. We're not .com. We're .digital. So there's no .com at the end.
Must be
Um,
expensive.
yeah, exactly. But yeah, you can find, like I said, we have blogs out there and YouTube, and just try to help people as much as we can. And then if people develop enough of a relationship with us that they want extra help, we try to make that apparent and give easy ways to do that. So yeah, feel free to head out there.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Mitch.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.